She's keeping your daughter from speaking." That was what an 11-year-old girl said to Bennett Forsyth on a Tuesday evening in September, when the rain was sheeting sideways against the glass walls of his house, and he had come home early from a board meeting for the first time in 3 months. She was standing in the kitchen doorway in mismatched socks, a cracked tablet pressed to her chest, and she said it without blinking. Bennett set his briefcase down on the counter. He was a man who had built a software infrastructure company from a leased desk in Gastown to a firm with offices in 4 cities. He was not easily rattled. But something about the way this child held her ground, the steadiness of her, the way she looked at him not with the wariness children usually showed around him, but with something closer to grief, made him go very still. "Say that again," he said. "Mrs. Ingrid." Phoebe Lamont swallowed once. "She's keeping Amara from getting better. She tells her that trying to speak will damage her voice permanently. She says it makes her worse." A pause. "She's been saying it for months." The house on Sentinel Hill Road had been designed by Faye. That was the first thing Bennett always thought when he came home. Not of the view, not of the cedar beams or the heated floors or the kitchen island. Faye had argued over for 3 weeks until she got exactly the stone she wanted. He thought of her standing in the architect's office with a pencil behind her ear, pointing at the southern elevation and saying, "It needs to breathe. A house should breathe." 8 months ago, a car had run a red light on Marine Drive, and Faye had stopped breathing, and their 8-year-old daughter, who had been in the back seat with a library book open in her lap, had watched it happen. Amara had spoken her last word in the ambulance. No one remembered what it was. The doctors called it selective mutism with a trauma onset. The explanations were careful and thorough, and ultimately, as far as Bennett was concerned, useless. Amara's throat had healed. Her vocal cords showed no damage. Her brain scans were unremarkable. There was no physiological reason she could not speak. She simply didn't. She communicated with her eyes, with nods, with the small gestures she had developed over months. She could write. She filled notebooks with careful handwriting. She laughed, sometimes, a soundless shake of her shoulders. She had a tutor who came in the mornings and said she was brilliant. She had Bennett, who sat with her every night and read to her until she fell asleep, and who had learned over 8 months how to carry a conversation entirely on his own. And she had Ingrid Solberg. Ingrid had come in June, referred by the hospital's outpatient team. She was 43, with a calm, unhurried manner and a portfolio of case studies that Bennett's own physician had called impressive. She specialized in trauma-related communication disorders. She wore her silver-streaked hair in a low knot and spoke about Amara's recovery the way an engineer speaks about a complex system, with measured confidence, without promises, with the right amount of uncertainty to seem credible. Bennett had liked that. He had been burned before by specialists who guaranteed things. Ingrid had only said, "She'll find her way back when she feels safe enough. Our job is to build that safety." By August, she was at the house 4 days a week. By September, she had a key. Amara did seem steadier. She had started eating more. She let Bennett hold her hand at the dinner table without pulling away, the way she had done in those first awful months. She watched Ingrid with a kind of quiet attention, and she had Phoebe. Phoebe Lamont had arrived in July with a duffel bag, a sketchbook, and approximately no opinion on the matter. Her mother, Tamsin, was a nurse who had taken a contract in Yellowknife, and the plan had always been for Phoebe to stay with her grandmother, Colette, for the summer. What no one had anticipated was that the contract would be extended through October. Colette Lamont had worked for the Forsyth family for 9 years. She was 66 and moved through the house with the particular confidence of someone who knows where everything is kept, including the things people try to hide. She made strong coffee and stronger opinions. She had watched Bennett fall apart after Faye's death and watched him reassemble himself. Not quite right, some pieces not fitting the way they used to, but standing. She was not sure about Ingrid Solberg. She could not have explained why, precisely. Ingrid was professional, she was polite, she always cleaned up after her sessions. But there was something in the way she positioned herself, always between Amara and the door, always the last to leave the room, always the first to notice when someone else had entered, that made Colette feel, in some animal way she did not discuss, that she was watching a cat guard a mouse it had not yet decided to release. Phoebe noticed things differently. Phoebe noticed with her sketchbook. She drew everything. She drew Bennett's hands around his coffee mug at 6 in the morning. She drew the great blue heron that landed on the deck railing every Thursday, for reasons known only to the heron. She drew Amara in profile, looking at the sound, and she drew Ingrid, though she never showed those pages to anyone, the way Ingrid's smile reached her eyes in some rooms and not in others. The way her voice changed when she believed the house was empty. The first time Phoebe heard Amara make a sound, it was a Tuesday in August. She had forgotten her sketchbook in the sunroom and gone back for it. The house was quiet. Ingrid had left. Bennett was still at the office. Colette was in the garden. And from behind Amara's half-open bedroom door came a small, tuneless sound. Not words, not quite. A hum. Like the beginning of a song that hadn't yet decided what it was. Phoebe stood very still. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then the house went quiet again, and when Phoebe looked through the gap in the door, Amara was sitting at her desk with a pencil in her hand, drawing something with great concentration, as if nothing had happened at all. Phoebe went to get her sketchbook. She didn't say anything to anyone, but she started paying closer attention. The sessions happened in the sitting room at the easted end of the house, where the morning light came in. Ingrid always closed the door. She called it reducing auditory distraction, and Bennett had never questioned it. Why would he? She was the expert. But the door didn't latch properly. The frame had swollen after a wet spring, and Bennett hadn't gotten around to having it fixed. And if you were small and quiet and positioned yourself behind the bookcase in the adjoining study, where the wall shared a corner with the sitting room, you could hear almost everything. Phoebe was small. She had always been quiet. She listened for 3 sessions before she understood what she was hearing. Ingrid's voice was gentle. It was always gentle, but the things it said were not. If you try to speak before you're ready, Amara, you could create a spasm in your vocal cords. Do you understand what that means? It means permanent damage. It means silence that can't be undone. And then, quieter, I know you miss your mum's voice. I know you're afraid that moving forward means leaving her behind. It's okay to stay where you are, sweetheart. There's no rush. You're safe here. Phoebe sat very still behind the bookcase and felt something cold move through her chest. The third session, she brought her tablet. She set it to record, propped it behind a row of old encyclopedias on the study shelf, angled toward the gap in the wall. She didn't tell Colette. She didn't tell Bennett. She wasn't sure what she had yet, only that she needed to have it before she could say anything to anyone. That evening she reviewed what she'd captured. The audio was muffled in places, but it was there, Ingrid's calm voice, deliberate and careful, building a wall inside a child, one careful brick at a time. She held the tablet for a long time after the recording ended, sitting on the edge of her bed with the rain coming down outside and the lights of West Vancouver blurring in the wet glass. Then she thought about Amara at her desk, drawing. Amara's eyes when Ingrid walked into a room, not the relief of a child who trusts her caregiver, but something smaller and tighter than that. Something that looked, when Phoebe let herself see it clearly, like fear dressed up as gratitude. She thought about her mother, far away in Yellowknife, who always said, "If something feels wrong, say something. Don't make yourself small to avoid the discomfort of speaking up." The next evening, Bennett came home early. He stood in the kitchen and listened to Phoebe say it again, more slowly this time, with Colette appearing behind her granddaughter and setting both hands on the girl's shoulders in a way that said, quietly and unmistakably, "I know. I already know. I just didn't have proof." "How long?" Bennett asked. He was surprised by how level his voice came out. 3 months, Colette said. "I didn't have proof, only a feeling." She looked at Phoebe. "Phoebe has proof." Phoebe held out the tablet. Bennett listened to the recording standing at his kitchen counter with his coat still on. He listened to it twice. Then he set the tablet down very carefully on the counter, the way a man sets down something he's afraid of dropping, and stood there for a moment with his eyes closed. "Where is Ingrid now?" he asked. "Guest house," Colette said. "She's been staying over these last 3 nights because Amara had a difficult week. Or so she said." Bennett nodded once. "Take Amara to your suite for the evening, both of you." He looked at Phoebe. "Thank you," he said, and meant it with his whole chest. He found Ingrid at the small kitchen table in the guest house, reviewing notes on her laptop. She looked up when he came in, and her expression did what it always did, settled into warmth, into composed readiness, into the face of someone who has been helpful for a long time and knows it. "Bennett, is everything all right? Is Amara?" "I need you to explain something to me," he said, and put the tablet on the table between them and pressed play. He watched her face while she listened. For the first 30 seconds, nothing changed. Then something shifted. Not much, just a tightening around the eyes, a quiet recalibration. When the recording ended, she sat back. "I see," she said. "And who was filming that?" "Does it matter?" "It matters for context. What you're hearing is a therapeutic technique called protective reframing. We work with the patient's existing fears rather than against them. It's a recognized approach in trauma-informed. You told an 8-year-old girl that if she tries to speak, she might lose her voice permanently." His voice was still level. He was fighting hard to keep it that way. "You told her that getting better means leaving her mother behind." Ingrid folded her hands on the table. "You're interpreting clinical language through a layperson's lens. These are established methods. I would be happy to walk you through the research." "She can speak." The words came out differently than he expected, not angry, but broken at the edges, the way something sounds when it's been held in too long. Phoebe heard her, alone in her room. "She's been speaking, Ingrid. She's been doing it when she thinks no one's listening." He pressed both palms flat on the table. "And you knew." Something moved across Ingrid's face then. Not guilt, which he might have understood, but calculation. The same expression he recognized from boardrooms when someone realized the position they'd been counting on had just collapsed. "You should be careful," she said, her voice quieter now. "Amara has come to depend on me. If you disrupt that relationship abruptly, the setback could be significant. The psychological impact on a child who loses a trusted is less than the damage of being told she has to stay broken." He straightened. "Get your things. I want you off the property tonight." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, picked up her laptop, and went to pack. He sat with Amara the next morning in the sunroom, just the two of them, October light coming through the glass in that amber, unhurried way particular to the coast in autumn. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say. It came out differently than rehearsed, the way important things often do. "Mrs. Ingrid isn't going to be coming back," he said. "She wasn't being truthful with us about some important things, about your voice, and about what it means for you to get better." Amara watched him. Her eyes were very like Faye's, that particular shade of dark brown that went nearly black in certain lights. "None of what she told you was true," he said. "There's nothing wrong with your voice. Trying to use it won't hurt you. And getting better," he stopped, pressed on. "Getting better doesn't mean leaving Mum behind. That's not how love works. She comes with you. She always comes with you." Amara's lower lip trembled. Then she pressed both hands flat against her thighs, the way she did when she was trying to hold herself together, and looked out at the water. They sat like that for a while. She reached for her notebook and wrote, "Is Phoebe staying?" He hadn't expected that to be her first question. "Yes," he said, "as long as she likes." Amara nodded slowly, and something in her shoulders, very slightly, came down. The new team arrived in November. Dr. Yoon referred them, a child psychiatrist named Dr. Ferreira, who had a way of speaking to Amara that managed to be both professional and entirely unguarded, and a speech pathologist named Dr. Kaminsky, who worked out of BC Children's Hospital and said, in their first meeting, "Amara is not broken. There's nothing to fix. We're just going to make a lot of space." Bennett sat in on every session. It was something Ingrid had always discouraged. He understood now why she had. Phoebe and Amara had their own sessions of a different kind. Sprawled across the playroom floor with sketchbooks open between them, working in a comfortable silence that was its own language. Phoebe never pressured Amara to speak. She didn't fill the quiet with nervous chatter. She simply existed alongside her, steadily and without condition, the way children sometimes know how to do when adults have forgotten the skill entirely. Dr. Kaminsky told him in December, "She's vocalizing in sessions. Sounds, not words yet, but she's trying. The barrier is psychological. She's testing whether it's safe. Once she trusts that it is, the words will come." "How will she know it's safe?" Bennett asked. "Honestly, She probably already does. She just needs enough time to trust what she already knows. It was a Sunday in January, and the house was full of the smell of Colette's tourtière from the kitchen, a recipe handed down through 4 generations of Lamont women that Colette made every winter without apology or modification. Phoebe was at the kitchen table, doing homework. The Canucks game was on in the background, down by 1 in the 3rd period, and Bennett was half watching from the couch while supposedly reviewing a contract. Amara was on the floor beside him, a picture book open in her lap, though she had read it at least a dozen times already. He was not paying attention to the precise moment it happened. He heard it the way you sometimes hear something you have been waiting for so long that when it finally comes, your brain needs a full second to catch up. A word, small and clear as a stone dropped into still water, and it was his name. Dad. He turned. Amara was looking up at him, her finger on an illustration of a mountain range. She had the look of someone who has done something they weren't sure they could do, and now isn't quite sure what happens next. Dad, she said again and pointed at the picture. That one looks like Whistler. In the kitchen, Colette went very still. Phoebe looked up from her homework. No one spoke. Bennett slid off the couch and down to the floor beside his daughter and put his arms around her, and for a while the only sound in the house was the hockey game and the distant water and Amara breathing, and Amara saying, very softly, as if practicing the particular mechanics of trust, "It's okay. I'm okay, Dad." In February, Ingrid Solberg's professional license was suspended pending an investigation by the College of Audiologists and Speech-Language Pathologists of British Columbia. A journalist from the Globe and Mail contacted Bennett through his lawyer. He agreed to speak on background, his name not used. The details changed enough to protect Amara. 3 other families came forward within the week, he told Phoebe. She was sitting on the deck in a parka that was 2 sizes too large for her, a February wind coming off Howe Sound, and she received the information the way she received most things, quietly, letting it settle before she responded. "So other kids are safe now," she said. "Other kids are safer now," Bennett said, "because of you." Phoebe looked at the water for a moment. "I was scared," she said. "When I came to talk to you that night, I kept thinking you wouldn't believe me." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But you listened." "I listened," he agreed. She nodded, apparently satisfied with this as a complete accounting of the matter, and turned back to her sketchbook. In April, Colette told Bennett she had received a letter from the building management company. The apartment in Kitsilano, where she and Phoebe lived, had been sold. The new owner intended to renovate, and the tenants had until June to vacate. She said it the way she said most difficult things, matter-of-factly, without complaint, already sorting logistics in her head before she'd finished the sentence. "Absolutely not," Bennett said. Colette looked at him. "There's a suite above the garage. I had it finished last year and haven't done a single useful thing with it." He gestured in the direction of the outbuilding. 2 bedrooms, proper kitchen, its own entrance. "It's yours if you want it, yours and Phoebe's." A pause. "And Tamsin's, when she's back." Bennett. "This house is too large," he said simply. "It's been too large since Faye died, and I've been living in it like a man who hasn't noticed. I notice now." Colette was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Phoebe will want her own shelf for her sketchbooks." "She can have a wall," he said. By summer, the suite above the garage was full of Phoebe's drawings and Colette's spice collection, and a small orange rug that Phoebe had picked out herself from a shop on 4th Avenue. Tamsin came back from the Northwest Territories in June and spent 2 weeks doing nothing at all, except eating Colette's cooking and watching her daughter grow into someone she hadn't quite expected. Amara spoke every day now, not always easily, and some days not much. The mutism had not vanished entirely but had retreated, the way damage retreats when finally given room to, slowly, unevenly, leaving behind a landscape that has to be learned differently. But she spoke. She said, "Good morning, and I don't like that show." And Phoebe, "Stop hogging the controller." And once, standing at the big south window watching the sun go down over the sound, she said quietly, "Mum would have liked this view." Bennett stood beside her and said, "She did like it. She designed it." And Amara said, "I know, she told me," and leaned against his arm. On a Saturday in late August, Bennett stood on the deck and watched Phoebe and Amara on the lawn below. Amara was running, actually running, the way she hadn't since before the accident. Arms stretched wide, chasing a gust of wind that was trying to steal Phoebe's sketchbook. Both of them were laughing. Amara's laugh had sound in it now, real sound, the kind that carries. Colette came out with 2 mugs of coffee and stood beside him. "You didn't find her in time," she said. Not unkindly, but directly, the way Colette said things. "Ingrid." "No," he admitted. "I should have." "Yes." But Phoebe did. She watched the girls. She was 11 years old, and she walked up to a man she barely knew in his own kitchen and told him the truth because it needed to be said. "That's not a small thing, Bennett." "No," he said, "it isn't." Down on the lawn, Amara had caught the sketchbook and was holding it over her head while Phoebe jumped for it, and both of them were making enough noise to carry all the way up through the cedar and glass, up into the particular blue of a BC August sky. Bennett stood there and let himself feel it. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something like the solid ground underneath where happiness eventually builds. The work of rebuilding was not finished. He didn't expect it to be, but the house breathed again the way Faye had always said it should. And from the lawn below, his daughter called up to him, "Dad, come down, Phoebe found a frog." He put down his coffee and went.